Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to the Reconstructing History podcast.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
So, I
Yeah,
come to you this I don't know how I look on camera. I made an attempt to put some makeup on, and what I put on reacted badly with the moisturizer I had on my
oh
face.
no.
And so I don't know if I have spots all over my face or anything. And then I tried to put on some eyeshadow, and it looked like a child threw things at me.
Looks fine to
And
me, my love. Looks fine to
yeah,
me.
I'm just, I mean, at least I didn't try to do winged eyeliner because that just looks like you took a freaking Sharpie to your face. I, I
Meanwhile,
am big into the UBU thing, but winged eyeliner on most people in most situations. Winged eyeliner during the day looks like you took a freaking Sharpie and went and made a check mark on the side of your face.
our podcast listeners are looking at each other going, okay, we have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. No, it's just, I mean, I don't know. I just every once in a while, I'm not somebody who wears a lot of makeup on a regular basis, and every once in a while I watch too many YouTube videos and I go, "Oh, I'll do that." And I've never been good at it, you know?
Right.
And then I'm an utter failure when it comes to putting stuff on my face, and, whatever.
Meanwhile, I'm
Whatever.
sitting here with a beard that hasn't been anything other than vaguely trimmed since the week before Christmas.
No one looks at you.
Okay, yeah, it's true. That's true.
Look at the art behind me. The art behind me is much more beautiful than either one of us will ever be. So
Just
just look at the art.
just cut the whole video when you edit this. Cut the whole video to show nothing but the art.
The video will show that
Yeah,
there.
that'll be fine.
That's fine.
So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, I thought, interestingly, strangely, I mean, this didn't occur to me when I started on this rant about what I look like today. Ego.
Wow.
No.
Wow. I mean, there's a little bit of irony there, but
Yeah.
just a smidge, just a
Yeah. Just
smidge.
goes to show how much it's been on my mind lately. What I mean by not irony, what I mean by ego is, um, basically when you're studying something, anything really, but in my case, it's historical clothing, and you get to know what you know, and you come up against someone who disagrees with you. This is always difficult. I'm gonna cough.
I can use this opportunity to take a sip of coffee.
Yeah, I breathed a dog hair in or something.
Mm.
Or pollen. My hyacinths are blooming and there's pollen like
Oh
crazy.
no.
Yeah. Anyway, so when you come across someone who disagrees with you and you have an argument about it, it's very difficult to get out of your own way because your first instinct, or at least my first instinct, is I've been studying this for 25 years. Who the hell are you? But I remember 25 years ago when people said to me, I've been studying this for 25 years. Who the hell are you? And, the answer was, I'm a person with some new information. Let's look at this. And that's my point. My point is that you have to step out of your own way.
Yeah, okay.
You can't allow your ego to get in the way of the truth, because if you are studying historical clothing, this isn't about you, it isn't about me, it isn't about any human being, it's about that thing that you're studying. And I'm a big believer in the Socratean dialectic,
Okay.
which is where two people present an argument to each other and they argue opposite points, or at least different points, if not diametrically opposed. And they find truth somewhere in the middle, because
Right.
truth, the idea that none of us holds truth, none of us knows exactly what truth is. Truth is not an absolute. So to find it, we have to work together to find it. And the best way to work together to find it is to poke holes in someone else's argument.
Yeah, yeah. Or to at least ask difficult questions. I'm a fan
Yeah,
of the Mulderian dialectic that posits the truth is out there, Scully.
the Mulderian dialectic.
Yeah.
Aliens. Um,
You ever seen one? You ever see one near a pyramid? Hmm? Hmm?
and yeah, and what is it? Whatever. Once you eliminate the impossible, no, once you eliminate the improbable, whatever
No,
remains,
no, no.
however
You were right the
impossible
first
must.
time. You were right the first
No,
time.
I'm not, because I'm talking about Douglas Adams,
Oh, oh yeah.
the Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul. What is it?
Yes.
The holistic Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency, not
Right.
Sherlock Holmes.
Right, right.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, the reality is that you are better able to find information, or find what that information means, the meaning in the information, by arguing the point with someone equally knowledgeable who holds an opposing view, who holds a different view from you.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And if you let ego get in your way, it ends up just being a lot of strutting and, don't you know who I am? Oh, I went to this school, I studied under this master,
Right.
whatever else. And it ends up being posturing, and neither of you learn anything.
I think it's interesting to if you go to any kind of scientific conference and you ask a question, a journalist, I remember reading an essay a while back. A journalist had gone to a bunch of scientific uh, conferences, and this journalist was asked about, people arrogance, people who think they know people who think they know everything. And this journalist opined that they had been to a lot of different scientific conferences, and the remarkable thing was when you ask an accomplished an accomplished scientist something about their field, they're the most self-effacing people you ever want to meet. They'll be, oh,
Hmm.
thank you for asking me, but you'd better ask Professor Hawkins over there. He knows much more on that question than I. Or,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
or
I
something
mean,
like that. I'm no expert. It's like the whole the story about imposter syndrome with, what was it, Buzz Aldrin in the back of a room, Neil Gaiman talking to Buzz Aldrin. And it's
no, it was Neil
Neil
Diamond and
Armstrong. Neil Armstrong. Yeah, yeah.
Neil Diamond said, "Yeah, I suffer from it too," and Neil Armstrong said, "So do I." And you're like, "What?
Yeah, Neil Armstrong's like, I
He
don't,
walked
I'm
on the
nothing
moon."
special. I'm nothing special.
Yeah,
I just went where they told me to go. And Neil Gaiman's like, are you fucking kidding me?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, I
But
mean, let's not overstate it. There is arrogance in the scientific community,
yes,
in any academic community, because your livelihood is based on your reputation. And if someone comes along and disproves you,
right.
you have a lot to lose.
Oh yeah,
And that's one of the things why scientific theory sometimes moves very slowly, because like I remember back in the 80s, um, or possibly 90s, but I think it was the 80s, hearing the first time hearing the Dr. Robert Barker talk about how dinosaurs were birds.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he nearly lost I mean, I think he lost his position at the university he was at. I think he was unemployable. I think he had to do, shit jobs for a bunch of years. And now it's generally accepted that the evolution of dinosaurs is birds.
Right.
And when you look at a dinosaur, and you look at a picture of a dinosaur, you can't help but see birds. And it's not because they started drawing them differently. You can look at a Victorian, the very, very earliest representations of dinosaurs, and they don't stop looking like birds to us now, because we see it, even though the Victorians who made those illustrations thought they were lizards.
Isn't that indicative of ego being a double-edged sword? Because it's an example of two different kinds of ego. Because on the one hand, you've got Professor Barker, and the towering egos of the establishment scientists who just, well, that can't possibly be right, and then you've got the towering ego of Dr. Barker, who was like, fuck you all, of course I'm right.
Well, I think that I've never met the man, but whenever I've heard him speak, he's sounded very, very humble. And I think that
I don't mean
but
ego in the
that,
pejorative sense. I mean,
yeah,
you have to be, it's
no,
your
no, no.
confidence in your opinions, right?
Yeah, yeah. That notwithstanding, I'm saying that the importance of not letting your ego overwhelm you, the importance of getting out of your own way is what Dr. Barker did, where he said, okay, if I was trying to preserve myself, I would shut up
Right.
and just, you know, keep my university appointment and just do what I do,
Keep
because then at
publishing.
least he would,
Just keep
yeah,
publishing.
well, then at least he would have a job. But he didn't just think he was right. Everything in his experience was leading him to this new theoretical approach, and he needed to be listened to. And I mean, it took 20 years, and then people listened to him, and now we know, in as far as we can know anything, we know that the descendants of dinosaurs are avian, they're birds.
I wonder how much
um,
of it. I wonder how much of that involved the previous generation just dying off. The ones who
it
just
probably
shat all over this theory. The establishment just had to
probably
die out.
Probably a good bit, because I mean, I always think of these, Old Testament prophet looking guys who are like, bro, 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 that can't possibly be so. And then, they die off, and then you have the 20s. And
I
I mean, you think about what did the 20s bring us? One of the first things that I think of when we talk about the 20s, which is very strange, although possibly not strange for me, is quantum theory, because it was a bunch of extremely young men, early 20 something men, who were either in the PhD program or had just finished their PhDs in physics, who came up with what we know as quantum.
right.
I mean, there were jokes about it being a young man's game. The older scientists didn't even approach this, because they were just like, it's crazy talk. It's kids stuff.
Yeah.
And but um, it took an, I want to say, an empty mind. It took a person with few preconceived notions to come up with that idea, because once you've been doing something for a while, you are an expert at it, and you know how things go, and you have a tendency to go, oh, that thing that you just said, that's impossible.
Yeah. I mean,
And
it's a kind of that. It's. I think it's a perfectly natural reaction if you're an expert in something. I mean, God knows I've done it myself.
Mhm.
Not that I'm really an expert in anything, but I have some small expertise in a couple of subjects. And when you have a kind of expertise and someone comes with something new that challenges that expertise, it's perfectly natural to become defensive.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that's what I'm saying, is it's really important when you're doing research of any type. And I mean, I'm speaking about historical clothing, but really research of any type is to get out of your own way and try to listen objectively. It's impossible to listen objectively because you are the subject, so you're going to be subjective. But try to hear it with open ears and see it with new eyes, because there's a shocking amount of things that you can learn from someone who's never looked at this stuff before.
Yeah.
There's stuff that you haven't seen that they see right away,
Yeah.
precisely because they haven't seen everything you've seen. And you can learn a lot from it, but you have to get out of the way. You have to just push your ego aside and have this very almost robotic approach, that it's the work that's important. I need
Yeah. I
to
mean,
focus.
it's kind of like getting out of your own way. I think is really important too, because there's ego in the terms of if someone coming up after you, the next generation or whatever you want to call it, comes up with new ideas about something that you've been dining out on for centuries. That's one thing. But another thing is when you're investigating something new too, that you kind of have to set aside the knowledge and expertise you've got. Like, if you're an expert tailor and you, by God, you know how an Elizabethan doublet goes together, and then you're confronted with the Dungiven jacket, you have to literally, or anything about the Dungiven outfit. Let's just say Irish clothing in general from the 16th
Yes.
century. You
Yeah.
have to just jettison all of those decades of hard-won, hard-fought expertise
Mhm.
and just come at it as new fallen snow. You have to let the information, you have to let the observations you make of the garments imprint on your psyche, as though you're. All right, this is going to be a really awful metaphor, but you'll love it. It's as though you're urinating on a bank of new fallen snow. That it has to be that new, that fresh, that never before, nothing has touched that snow before in order for you to properly synthesize it, I think. Because otherwise you'll just sit there and look at the Dungiven jacket and go, well, that's just not possible,
Yeah.
irrespective of the fact that the flippin' thing is sitting there on the table in front of you and you can see it.
Well, do you remember, I don't know if I've ever said it on the podcast before. I know you've heard me say it a million times in life, but, the woman who read my article on the Shinron gown and said, "Well, that's not what the Irish wore." And I was like, "Time machine, anyone?" Here's a 16th century garment that they pulled out of a bog in Ireland,
Yeah.
and she had an idea. Now, she was a theatrical costumer, and I'm sure I don't know this for certain. I don't know the woman. She didn't speak to me. She'd said this to a friend of mine, so the whole thing could be made up. Um, it wasn't made up. She really said it. But she had a Master of Fine Arts in theatrical costume. And I guess, that when you costume Shakespeare, there's a way that you represent Irish people and that's the traditional way. And that's what she learned in school. But if they're not wearing Leinton Shinron gowns, you're wrong.
Yeah. Right.
Um, and I don't know what she meant. I don't know what she thought Irish clothing looked like. But to say, if they pulled a garment out of the Irish bog that had, a pair of trousers with 3 legs, and you said, "Well, that's not what the Irish wore," and you're like, "Well, here's a pair of trousers with obvious wear that somebody wore them for years and years and years." You can't say they didn't wear them if it's obvious they wore them,
Yeah, but
you know?
you could also tell a really dirty joke.
Yes, it's very true. It's true.
Whoa.
You know, Cromwell's troops documented the Irish all had tails.
Oh, tails.
Oh, that's another thing. We have perfect documentary evidence that Irish people in the 17th century, mid-17th century, had 6-inch tails.
Yeah, I mean, if you're
You know?
right.
If you wanna believe the conqueror, if you wanna believe the person who wanted to eliminate Irish people from the face of the earth, go right ahead.
Dirty
Oh,
Catholics.
they're yeah. Well, they're animals. And it wasn't just Catholics, though, it was the Irish.
Oh yeah.
They're animals. Look, they all have tails. They're animals. We should
It's
exterminate them because
it's
they
the
are
same old
ungodly.
story. It's why othering is such a clear-cut science. It's,
Yeah.
if you characterize other human beings as, less human than you, it's easy to exterminate them. It's easy just to kill them and not suffer any pangs of conscience about it.
Yep.
Boy, that
Yep.
went dark. That went super dark. Went from dick
Yeah.
jokes to killing people to genocide.
I I don't know where you. Yeah. Well, we started talking about tails, and I had to do the thing. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, and you have to be a little. You can't be precious because I can't tell you how many years I've been saying, the Irish didn't wear kilts. The Irish didn't wear kilts. The Irish didn't wear kilts. The Irish, if the Irish ever wore kilts, it was in response to Pádraig Pierce in 1916 when the Irish were looking for a national costume, and the only men's clothing that they had in the National Museum of Ireland at the time was the Kilcommon and the Kilcommon he thought looked like men's long underwear. And he thought, oh, if we wear that as our national costume, everyone will laugh at us because it'll look like we're wearing our underwear. Um, it'll look like we're wearing long johns running around. And he said, I would rather we adopt the kilt of our Scottish cousins than be accused of running around in our skivvies. And so there's a definite. I would here's the father of Irish independence, grandfather of Irish independence, who said this, and that's when it started. You could date it to the letter. We have the letter. The letter
Right.
exists. We know what date I don't remember the date, but it was the date. The letter was written on a certain date, giving advice. And but I went on. The Irish didn't wear kilts. The Irish didn't wear kilts. The Irish didn't wear kilts, and they sure as hell didn't wear kilts made out of linen. Well, there's a runaway ad in like a Boston newspaper in the 18th century, before the foundation of the United States, so in colonial America. There's a runaway ad that, and these runaway ads were advertisements in the paper because if you were a servant, an indentured servant, you basically were property. And if you ran away from your indenture, um, your master would publish an ad in the newspaper so that if you were found, you could be returned, so that you could finish out your indenture because you had a contract.
He paid
So
for you, by God.
yeah, and the way they described people wasn't, they have if they had a scar or something, they would say that, but the usual thing was to say hat on took with him.
Yeah.
He was wearing this and he may have taken this with him because people didn't have, you didn't run away from your indenture with a trunk full of clothing. You ran away with the clothes on your back. So, yeah, these two Irishmen ran away from their indenture and they were described as wearing linen kilts. And there it was in 18th century America. And I laughed out loud.
I remember.
What can you do? Now, the question is, there's no photograph.
Right.
The question is, what were they describing as a kilt?
Right.
And what was linen?
But I think the point is not to dodge.
Yeah,
not to start descending into pedantry in order to dodge the fact that this thing that you've been dining out on for the past few years is demonstrably, it's not fair to say bunk, but it is fair to say there are exceptions. Evidence has been found.
And what I did with it was I took a picture of, the original ad in the newspaper that I found. I took a picture of it and I shared it on every bit of social media, email list, forum group thing that I belong to, and went, well, I'll be damned, And because the way I felt about it was, hell, better that I make fun of myself than somebody else get a hold of it and say, look, you've been wrong all these years.
Yeah.
And I will argue I'm not wrong, but you can show me
your general principle remains true, I think.
Yeah.
Because that is an isolated piece of, but again, without descending into pedantry, the important thing there is that while there's plenty of room for ego, there was plenty of scope for you to just go, nuh-uh, and stick your fingers in your ears, or to descend into
Mhm.
that pedantry and make excuses for it. Rather than do that, you went, well, I'll be damned.
Yeah, and like I said, you have to get out of your own way because if you're doing research, the thing that you are trying to discover, the truth that you're after, is more important than you are
Right.
and will outlive you. It will outlive you.
It's like
And
what you've said for ages about research and the art and science of conducting research. Setting out to prove a preconception or a prejudice is dangerous. Yes, you have to have a hypothesis that you're testing for, but you have to
Mhm.
be willing. You have to construct the test so that there's a possibility you might be wrong, and then you have to accept that you're wrong.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that
I
is a thing I
remember
think that eludes many people in the humanities, at least, or who
mhm.
deal in the purely theoretical, from from police detectives to clothing historians. They set out to prove what they're convinced is true, and they assemble the evidence in such a way that it must irrevocably be true.
Yeah, and I remember the first like, my first foray into, research, historical research on clothing was, um I was in a reenactment group, and the person who ran the magazine for the reenactment group asked me if I would write an article on the kilt, because all these college kids were coming to events wearing kilts like in Braveheart, and she said, "I don't think that's right. Could you write an article about it?" Because she knew I had something to do with Irish or Scottish something, it was just kind of one of those vague things. And so I set out now, if you remember before Braveheart came out, there was this huge media campaign about how much research they did on
Yeah,
clothing, that they had all of this research done, that they had a wool manufacturer weave the wool for them specifically according to historical examples. There was this huge, huge amount of information, and it was horseshit. Every bit of it was horseshit. They put the Scots in kilts because they needed to have, the shirts and the skins. They needed to have them look different from the English on the battlefield, and they wanted that visual indicator. The fact of the matter is the Scots that existed at the time didn't wear anything that looked that much different from what the English wore at the time, and William Wallace wasn't a Highlander, so he wouldn't have been in a kilt anyway.
yeah,
Mm, the whole idea of clan tartans and tartan in general, it's just that they went and had this woven. I'm like, "Oh, I'm glad you paid a lot of money to a lot of weavers who needed the work, but somebody took your ass for a ride." But I went into it with the preconceived notion that, medieval Scots wore kilts, and within, the first moment of reading the literature, knew that the medieval Scots didn't wear anything remotely resembling a kilt.
yeah,
And then I wrote, my first article, "The Evolution of the Kilt," um, which, so that's the thing. You go in with a preconceived notion, and if you get proven wrong, you have to be wrong.
yeah. I mean, and that's the crux of a lot of the great fictional detectives. From Poirot to Holmes.
Mhm.
When one eliminates the impossible, that which remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
Yeah,
And
and you
it's
you
just the
have to
thing. You have
you
to be able to cope with that.
you can't go in with no preconceived notions because that's just really not
Yeah,
likely. But you have to allow them to fall apart.
yeah,
You have to allow that you're starting out wrong. Because if you don't, it's like, you try to build something, like you try to build a house of cards, and if you try to build a house of cards on a table that has stuff on it, you're not gonna be very successful. You have to clear all the stuff off
I think
first.
I think if I can construct an axiom, and maybe you'll help me with this because I'm pretty sure it's shaky. Um, you have to let the evidence take you toward the truth rather
Mhm.
than try and carry the evidence along and construct that house of cards.
Yeah.
I mean, it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, Professor Brian Cox, of whom I am a great fan,
All right.
complains.
You want to be Brian Cox? I'll be Darryl Breen. Nah.
Not gonna be Brian Cox. I don't have the hair for it.
You can do the accent though. Us.
Yeah, was,
Look up into the
um
night sky. The stars looking down on us.
there you go.
A bit more Lister
Oh,
than Brian Cox, but there you are.
yeah. Um, yeah, I can't do Manchester, I can only do Liverpool. Liverpool, I can't quite do Manchester.
Oh, but Dr.
Um,
Cox, nah.
yeah. Anyway, Professor Brian Cox I've heard him complain about funding for science, and funding for science tends to be in certain areas, um, it's, I don't know, is it inductive? I might be using the wrong terms, inductive and deductive, but basically, funding for science tends to be, "Okay, we need this military thing, go find us a military solution."
Right.
We right now, we need the cure for this, uh, virus, go find us a vaccine. Go study the virus. And it's interesting because, I think I saw a TV program, and I think the number is there was something like 3 experts in the world on coronaviruses, like 3 epidemiologists, or not epidemiologists, but, virologists.
Virologists, yeah.
Yeah. 3 virologists in the entire world who were coronavirus experts. Um, and, they got a big boost from this, but ultimately, and the reason the vaccine came about so quickly is because we had vaccines from treating other coronaviruses. But when you do research, whether it's humanities or scientific, the best thing to do is to, you know, choose a piece to look at, but don't go into it with any preconceived notions. And what Brian Cox's complaint is that we learn the most when we try to look at a piece of everything rather than, "Oh, we want to find out, w how to harness the power of black holes," or something. And because that really limits what you're looking at, and you end up missing things because you're trying to find a power source, and instead you might be finding the answer to, the origins of life on this planet.
Right.
But you're not looking at that.
Right.
When you get that information, you kind of have to disregard it and throw it away as false data because it's not along the stream of what you are
Yeah.
trying to discover. And
Interdisciplinary examination of data.
well, yeah, and I mean, not necessarily interdisciplinary, but what Professor Cox was trying to get at is you can't just fund this thing that's important to your military,
Oh yeah,
this
yeah.
important to whatever your government's on about this week, you know?
Space travel, which was
Yeah,
really military, but like that's why we have
yeah.
microwaves and ballpoint pens, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, and we learned a lot from the various scientific explorations that came about because of the moonshot. And that's great. And, certainly there have been great technological advances because of the military needing a better way to kill people. We've had many advances in science that have nothing to do with killing people. But when you study science, as what you might call a pure scientist, someone who is seeking after knowledge, seeking to understand how something works. If you are an astrophysicist, not because you want to work on the next moonshot, but an astrophysicist who wants to understand the cosmos, you're not limited by the narrow scope of the project.
Right.
And I say we, but it's governments all over aren't giving funding to science, say science for science sake.
Yeah.
And so we're not learning as much as we could learn because we're being focused on mostly how to kill each other.
Yeah, it's a thing. Or how to make
And
either how to kill the most people as efficiently as possible, or how to make the most money with the least amount of
yeah,
effort.
yeah, and what we really need to be doing is trying to figure out how to save as many people as possible
Yeah, well,
and fix the planet.
that's why we are
Um,
who we are, my dear.
yeah, yeah. So it's but and that's all also, a thing of ego. You have to care more about the work
Hmm.
than about
But
your name.
yeah, I have to. Yeah, I mean, it helps. There comes a point where if you care about the truth and what is real, there comes a point when you realize that you have to have a name in order for for your truth to have any hope of propagating.
Mhm. Which is a shame because
But
someone with a name could make wonderful discoveries
no, yeah, but no one would ever hear of them because they haven't
and no
got a
one would ever
name.
know.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
and
like how many concert pianists died in the coal mines.
yeah,
Um, but that's insoluble until we get Roddenberry's universe in
yeah,
our own, unfortunately.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
I want to circle back a bit to being
Well,
an
just let me
interdisciplinarian. But go on.
let me say one more thing about this. I wanted to say something about funding, and now I can't remember. Oh, one of the reasons ego gets in the way is because it's not just purely an arrogant, selfish thing, but that person who's made her name with this discovery, if she gets proven wrong, she's not gonna have a job anymore.
Yeah, her funding will
And
dry
if
up.
yeah, and if she doesn't have a job anymore, she can't live,
Yeah.
and that's a really good reason not to want to encourage the people who come up behind you.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure.
And
It's
if you've got
literally urinating on pieces of sandbox in order to mark it as yours.
yeah, and not just out of ego, but out of self-preservation, out
Yeah.
of, "I'm not gonna have a retirement
Right.
if you disprove me." What should happen, of course, is that, a researcher's livelihood shouldn't be tied to whether they're correct or not.
Right.
Mhm. So, if you come up with a theory that disproves someone, that person shouldn't be out of a job, and, because, they certainly are still a brilliant researcher.
Research isn't a zero-sum game.
No, it isn't, and the thing that makes us egotistical is, if I'm head of this department and you prove me wrong, how could I possibly go on doing my job?
Yeah.
And it's all about, a salary, and if you
Hmm.
didn't have to worry about that, I mean, there'd still be ego, it's human, I
Yeah.
don't want you knocking me off of my perch, but at least it would just be a name,
Yeah.
and what's in a name, it wouldn't be livelihood.
I mean, for crying out loud, if you still have tenure,
Yeah,
I
but,
mean,
I'm just thinking bigger than tenure, but
yeah.
yeah, yeah. exactly.
heads of departments and stuff like that losing their position because the thing that they've been dining out on for the past 20 years has now been proved to be is now passé.
Yeah, and why does that make them, the person, discardable?
Right.
You know, the
It,
theory is discardable. The
it
theory
certainly
is just
shouldn't. You
yeah,
should,
but the human
get the
being.
plaudits for discovering. Like no one, no one throws Newton away because his principles of physics, because Newtonian physics doesn't universally apply across the cosmos.
Yeah. Newton is what we all learn in physics first,
Right.
because for localized
Phenomena.
things,
Yeah.
phenomena, it works perfectly well.
Right.
And he was a genius. I mean, it worked in the environment in which he
If you're going
lived.
to cancel Newton, there are certainly better reasons.
Mhm. And I mean,
The fact that he was a
Einstein,
colossal dickwad is,
yeah, yeah,
talk about
recluse,
ego.
recluse,
Jesus.
hateful person, terribly hateful person. But Einstein, much of Einstein's theory disproved Newton, but you can't use Einstein until you get farther away or
You got to
out in
crawl
space,
before you can walk.
closer to the speed of light. And now we're disproving bits of Einstein.
Yeah. And
And
whose
we
name
will.
are physicists going to be talking about in 10, 20 years' time?
Yeah, and we should disprove Einstein. We should go to the next level. We should find the thing that makes more sense.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that,
Doesn't mean that everything that
Einstein.
came before is worthless.
Yeah, it doesn't. And it doesn't mean everything that came before was wrong. It's not
Right.
wrong. It's just not complete.
It's not as right, maybe.
Yeah.
And incomplete, as you note. Yeah. Well, it's
Yeah,
like
like I said, you
it
could still.
I think I'm gonna I got two points I want to make about ego, and interdisciplinarianism is the place I want to go first. I was
Mhm.
watching a thing recently, and I misremember what it is, so I'm not even going to try. But archaeologists found this piece of bone in a prehistoric dig, and it was very clearly a tool, very clearly used for something, and they had no idea what it was. And so, of course, archaeologists working in prehistory, if you don't know what it is, you assign a ritual value to it, catalog it, and go on your way. And
It's God.
sometime later, someone else, a craftsman, came by and said, "Oh yeah, it's a leather burnisher."
Yeah.
And the archaeologists were like, what? Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I've got one of those in my kit. Here, look at it." And it was exactly the same, bone or antler or some shit like that. And the archaeologist went, "Well, damn." And if I remember correctly, and I'm probably wrong, but it rewrote a portion of the story of that dig site,
Mhm.
because it let them go, okay, well, if that's a leather working tool, then that explains these other tools, blah, 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 and it rewrote a bit. And that was
Yeah.
really important. Getting that interdisciplinary input, and more
Mhm.
importantly for our topic today, the archaeologists accepting that interdisciplinary input as not just possible, but true.
Mhm.
Now, of course, they verified it. They looked at the leather worker's tool, and they were like, okay, yeah, it's the right shape. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, okay, that's the same thing.
Mhm.
If our podcast listeners are going, what the hell was that just about? I had a prop, and I was using it for the video, folks. It was a emery board for doing one's nails, as a matter of fact. But yeah, the point is this interdisciplinary input redefined and rewrote some of the archaeological analysis.
Mhm.
And shit, I was going to go somewhere else with that.
Well, and not just interdisciplinary input, but, that's a case of
Oh, yeah,
someone,
yeah,
a scientist, an archaeologist talking to who is essentially a member of the public.
yeah.
This other person wasn't an archaeologist, they were a leather worker.
Yeah, I mean, it
And
was. Yeah, it's like in that it's like the hard sciences, and the humanities have to intersect
Mhm.
for what the hard scientists come up with to have any real meaning.
Well, yeah, and I mean, archaeology in particular, if archaeologists aren't talking to people in the
Yeah,
humanities and historians,
historians and
then
anthropologists and blah 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 blah. Blah. Yeah,
and not just historians and anthropologists, but living historians
yeah.
and also modern craftspeople,
That is
modern people.
such a thing that I love, because I remember when I first started getting involved in living history, the academics wanted nothing to do with it.
Mhm.
Nothing to do with it. It was if you were an academic and you participated in, experimental archaeology, you were laughed at. And now
Oh, and
you watch any, time team or any kind of there's a bunch
the
of
later time
programs.
teams, not the early
Oh
time
yeah.
teams, but the later time
Well, I
teams.
think Time Team Phil Harding had a huge impact on that, because here's a
Mhm.
guy a prehistory guy, and what did he went out and learned how to nap flint,
Mhm.
and it
Yeah.
informed his understanding of what he was finding on the sites. And Time Team becoming famous
Mhm.
kind of got that ball going, and but anyway, you have to, and I think that again is a double-edged sword, because here, and let's take it back to ego. The second thing I wanted to say is the most influential book on the way I view ego in
I
what
know
we
what you're gonna
do
say. Yeah.
is a comic book called
Mhm.
Motel of the Mysteries. I don't even know
Mhm.
if it's still in print. I'm sure it is. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon. I'm sure Cass will drop a link right here or in the description for it. And if you engage in any kind of research that's based on artifacts, historical material culture, and you don't own a copy of this book to restrain your ego, the most important piece of advice I can give you is go and buy a copy, read it, and take it to heart.
Somebody sent me the copy that we have in our house.
Yeah.
Somebody sent that to me, um, way back when I was just starting to do research, and she sent it to me because she kind of saw herself as my auntie, my older sister who was
Right.
there before me, and she wanted to teach me a lesson without preaching at me. Because
Yeah.
I tell you what, the hardest person to teach a lesson to is the new person
The
who
zeal of
thinks
the
they
newly converted, right?
oh god, we're so hard to talk to. But she just kind of like, I'm gonna send you a present. It's a book. And I was like, oh, I love books. And she sent me this book, and I was like, what is this? Oh, this is good.
This is a
But if she
cautionary tale.
yeah, but if she had said those things to me, I
Yeah.
would just be like, ah, old bitch, doesn't want doesn't
What do
want
you
me to take over her territory,
What do you know,
whatever.
Grandad? You don't know
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah. But no, it was subtle, and it was smart, and I
Yeah.
thank her for that. And if I could
It,
remember
it
her name, I would say it.
life
But
changing.
yeah, you know who
And
you are. Thank you.
it wasn't
Um,
Breege, was it?
no, no, it wasn't
Okay.
British. No, no, this was long after that.
Oh, okay. Anyway.
I mean, long before that, long before that. By the time I met Breege, my head was screwed on straight.
Oh, okay.
Breege,
But yeah,
Ernie,
it
hi
is
Ernie.
a great book, and I recommend it. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Yeah, it's goofy. It's totally goofy, but
If you take it in the
it's
spirit of the cautionary tale that it is,
mhm,
it'll
mhm.
have a profound impact on how you interpret
Yeah, and
anything.
one of the things what I thought it was saying when I first saw it, until I thought about it, really annoyed me because I really dislike people who go around saying, "Oh, scientists know nothing," you know, and because they got something wrong, like
Right.
the leather worker's tool,
Yeah.
the archaeology dig, or they there was a situation where for decades, if not 100 years, the wrong head was on a dinosaur skeleton,
Ah,
a rather famous dinosaur skeleton, just because it was in the wrong box. So
right.
they skeleton together, and this is a dinosaur skeleton that many people have seen and that many illustrations have been based upon, and its head doesn't look anything like that because they got the wrong piece. Um, and I really dislike when people say, "Oh, scientists don't know nothing," um, because they make mistakes. Human beings make mistakes. We're not all
Yeah.
knowing.
Right.
And the important thing is when you discover that you've made a mistake to fix it. And
Oh, yeah. Own up to
science
it and fix it.
science is and I'm including in science historical, I should say research. Research is a process of answering small questions in pursuit of a whole, like, three-dimensional picture.
Right.
And you can get a lot of the small questions wrong and still build a decent picture.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, if you because I'm using the metaphor of a picture, if you take a photograph and there are things in the background that you can't see in the photograph because they're out of focus, you can gradually get a better lens to take a better photograph,
Hmm.
and with more detail and sharper images and
Speaking of
better,
astrophysics, hello, Hubble.
yeah, better lighting and, better optics, all
Yeah.
these kinds of things. And and you can take a better picture, you can make a better image, tell a better story.
Hmm.
And that doesn't mean that the first images were bad.
Right.
They just weren't as good. And it certainly doesn't mean the first images were wrong.
Right. I mean, it
So
does it could mean that the interpretations that humans made based
mhm,
upon the available data were wrong. I mean, we used to live in a world where we thought, you know, uh, we had to make up stories about where the rain came from.
mhm,
And many of those stories, if you stop, the anthropologists and cultural historians will point out the very effective chains of logic that the rain clearly comes from this, or it's like what is I just read it last night in one of the Dune books, that a man stands on the fence, stands at a fence, and one of the vertical slats of the fence is missing. And every day at a certain time, an ass of the desert walks by. And the man watches as the nose passes, and then the body passes, and then the tail. And then he turns around one day and he says, "It's very clear, very clearly, the nose causes the tail."
mhm,
And is it true? No. Is it impeccable logic based on observations? Yes.
mhm,
But when you zoom in further, when you go from Galileo with his simple tube with glass lenses at either end to the Hubble,
mhm,
suddenly you can, or from a Pasteur and his little device on a table, his smaller telescope, to
mhm.
scanning electron microscopes, you can zoom in on problems more minutely and answer questions with much much greater granularity, and that is immensely important. But that doesn't mean that what went before is wrong
Yeah,
necessarily.
I get really offended by anybody who says that, scientists don't know anything
Yeah,
because their theories get disproven. I mean,
that's the point of science.
that's the game. The
Yeah,
game is, let's keep looking at it and looking at it and looking at it, and we get something where we think we can draw conclusions. Let's draw some conclusions, but then let's test and test and
yeah.
test and test and test.
People
Um,
people want universal truths. People want universal truths to be established and never again questioned, and
yep,
that,
water
that
is
that's
wet.
human nature. It,
Water is wet.
right, right. Snow is cold, water is wet, fire is hot. They want these universal truths to exist in a universe that doesn't really have universal constants that we can discover.
Mhm.
I mean, there is no
One
universe.
universal constant is that Flash is not comfortable.
I keep hearing him maneuvering in the background.
I'm gonna flip around the camera just to see, just to show our listeners,
Our viewers.
our viewers.
Oh, there he is. There's the
There it
birthday
is. Do you
boy.
see it? Do you
I
see
can
him?
see him. Yep.
He's just gotten into this position where his nose is turned under and he's ignoring the world. I think I'm talking too much and he's angry
Probably.
with me.
Probably.
But the noise you hear is his butt. Every time he moves, his butt hits
Bangs
the
into the doors.
door. Yeah.
He's 11 years old just the other day.
Yes. Yes, he is.
11 years old,
Old,
bless him. Still
old,
romping
old.
like a lunatic. Maybe you'll cut in a
Oh,
bit of footage of his latest romp.
oh God, yeah. I'll get a good one. Yeah, he's kind of funny with the snow because he's a Florida dog, so snow. He hasn't lived in a lot of places where there was snow, and
Yeah, he
the
came
snow
from
is
Florida to Pennsylvania in the summertime, and then before
yes.
we hit winter, we moved to St. Croix.
Yes, and he lived in, but he did. I mean, he did live in Pennsylvania for 2.5 years
After we
in the
moved
snow
back from,
after he moved back.
yeah,
So he knew some snow,
yeah,
But right now, because I can't take him to the groomer to get his nails trimmed, and I can't trim
oh,
because they're so long, they're
yeah,
so thick. Um, his nails are too long, and I mean, I think today it got to -1 Celsius, so that's like 29 degrees Fahrenheit.
yeah,
And that's the hottest it's been since last Sunday or Saturday. No, Friday, last Friday.
for at least a week.
So it's normally not below freezing here for not during the day at least.
Right.
And so all of the snow has ice under it.
Mm. Poor thing.
And
He must be suffering so.
well, if he stays on the snow, as you'll see in the video, if he stays on the snow, he can do whatever he likes, but he doesn't like being in the snow because it's up to his ankles and his feet are cold. So
Oh, what a baby.
he wants to walk on the flat where there isn't so much snow and it's all ice.
Oh, poor thing.
And now I managed to sprinkle out some salt. So I have a couple of places near the doors where it's completely dried out now because
That's
the
good.
the salt made it sublimate. But yeah, there's not enough salt in the world to do everything.
Yeah, yeah. Well, glad you got a
Yeah,
bit of it
but
done at least.
yeah, well, tomorrow it's going to be 7 degrees.
Oh, okay.
So we're supposed to have a thaw. So tomorrow it'll be mud. Everything will be mud. It'll be great. It'll be wonderful. It'll be mud.
Well, just toss him into the laundry room and hose him down.
Oh, it's just complaining that I'm gonna have to mop the floors because I've been really careful to take off my boots at the door,
Right.
but I'm still somehow dragging salt into the house, and the hallway, right in front of the door
Yeah.
has black tile, so you can really see the salt marks on it. So I'm gonna have to mop the floor, but I'm not gonna mop the floor today because tomorrow everything's gonna be mud. So why bother?
Why make the bed? You're just going to sleep
Why?
in it again anyway.
I do make the bed. I make the bed. I don't mop the floors.
So that is our video on our podcast on ego
Yes.
and dealing with ego in any kind of pursuit of knowledge. At least,
Yeah.
we have enough ego to think that we can talk about it with some kind of authority.
Yeah. I am egotistical. I am egotistical enough to think I can tell you what to think about ego.
I think both of us have been burned rather
Mhm.
badly by being egotistical
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
areas where we've had expertise, and we don't want anybody that we like, including you, dear viewer and dear listener, to suffer the same fate.
Mhm.
So
I've made this mistake, and I know when I don't make this mistake, wonderful things happen. When I
yep,
get out of my own way,
hmm
I learn so much.
yep,
So, try to keep out of your own way. Try to put your ego aside and do the work for the sake of the work,
it's
and work with other people who do the same.
and every time you think you've got it sorted, ask yourself if they were going to make a book like Motel of the Mysteries about me and this work that I'm doing, would it be like Motel of the Mysteries, or would it be something real? And with that,
Would you do you really want A toilet seat hanging around your head.
Oh, spoiler alert. Anyway, the link for that book is in the description. We don't have any kind of affiliate or anything. Just go and get it. Get yourself a copy. It's great. Um, if you're watching us on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, all that sort of thing. If there's something you would like to hear us talk about, uh, or you have something to say about this video or any of our videos, leave us a comment. You can also send us email at info@reconstructinghistory.com. If you're finding this on your favorite podcast server, leave us a review, leave us a rating. We'd really, really, really appreciate that. So far, I've touted it in the last few podcasts. We haven't gotten anything yet, but we will, because this is too tantalizing for many people to pass up. If you leave us a review on your favorite podcast provider, and we look at this, we find this review, we will select one review and read it in the podcast, irrespective of what the review's contents are. So if you want to plug your podcast, if you want to call me a poopy head, anything like that, we will happily read it out on air. But you have to leave that rating and review first. Don't just send us an email.
And as you well know, we are not above swearing. So
Nah, fuck
do your
it.
worst.
So yeah, that's it for... Huh? What?
All right.
That's it for today. That's it for today's video / podcast / whatever you want to call it. We will talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You think it sounded like styrofoam before? Listen to this. But look at the sparkly. Can you see the sparkly? It's like fake snow with glitter on it. You see the sparkles? Twinkle, twinkle. Twinkle, twinkle. Where's my dog gone? Hey, dog. Where are you? Flashy. Do you see him? I don't see him. Oh. Where have you gone? Oh, there you are. Okay, good. Did you pee? I assume you've done something because you don't run for nothing. Okay. You want to go back in? Go back inside? This is a quickie. Look at sparkles. Look at all the sparkles. Oh, the sparkles. It's like glitter. Go on. Go inside. Go inside. That's the wrong light. Ah.